For millennia, the greatest ancient empires built their absolute power on massive, life-giving rivers like the Nile, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. But the foundation of Western civilization was born on a barren, fractured peninsula of jagged rocks, where survival was a daily struggle. When the ruthless Roman legions eventually marched into these lands in 146 BC, they were absolutely certain they could absorb Greece forever. Instead, a stunning historical paradox occurred. The Roman poet Horace perfectly documented it. Captive Greece took captive her fierce conqueror. Within just a few decades, the brutal Roman invaders began speaking the Greek language, adopting their gods, and copying their state architecture. Any other fractured nation would have vanished after a military defeat, but Greece did what no one else could. They digested Rome. To understand the absolute depth of this civilization, we need to rewind time far back, long before the famous philosophers of Athens. By 3000 BC, on the island of Crete, the Minoan civilization had already established the very first advanced society in all of Europe. They constructed massive, unfortified palace complexes like Knossos, dominated the Mediterranean maritime trade, and developed a complex writing system called Linear A. But around 1600 BC, a new, highly aggressive force emerged on the rocky mainland, the Mycenaeans. These were the first true Greeks. They were fierce, chariot-riding warriors who built colossal stone fortresses like the legendary city of Mycenae, using multi-ton boulders. The Mycenaeans were so powerful that by the 14th century BC, they completely absorbed the Minoans and seized total control of the Aegean. They established a massive, heavily centralized network of palace economies, meticulously recording their state administration in an early Greek script known as Linear B. But the most catastrophic event in human history struck around 1200 BC. The entire Bronze Age world suffered a sudden, violent, and total collapse. Under the immense pressure of mysterious naval invaders known as the Sea Peoples, the magnificent Mycenaean palace states were systematically burned to the ground. The global supply chains were completely annihilated. The disaster was so absolute and traumatizing that the Greek population literally forgot how to read and write. For 400 agonizing years, Greece was plunged into a brutal, illiterate Dark Age. Their grand golden history was reduced to mere spoken myths. Any other culture would have permanently dissolved into the historical melting pot. But cut off from the world, the isolated Greeks were forced to mutate. Hidden away in remote, easily defensible mountain valleys, they abandoned the dead bronze trade and began forging a new civilization entirely out of iron. And out of this apocalyptic 400-year darkness, they invented a completely new, decentralized political survival mechanism, the independent city-state, the polis. In the 8th century BC, Greece emerged from the Dark Ages, transforming scattered villages into magnificent independent city-states known as the polis. In Athens, visionary lawgivers like Solon began writing the first democratic constitutions, shifting power away from the hands of ruthless tyrants. But to the south, the city of Sparta took a radically different path, rejecting luxury to build an austere, unfortified military utopia. The legendary Spartan lawgiver Lycurgus established a strict, brutal code of absolute discipline, turning every male citizen into a lifelong soldier. Meanwhile, an intellectual explosion occurred in the East. In 585 BC, Thales of Miletus accurately predicted a solar eclipse using pure logic. This was the birth of Western philosophy. For the first time, men stopped blaming the gods and started looking for rational answers. They began mapping the universe. Scholars meticulously documented complex geometric formulas, realizing that mathematics was the true language of nature. Pythagoras discovered the mathematical relationships behind music and triangles, proving that the cosmos was built on perfect, predictable harmony. Hippocrates completely separated medicine from religion, proving that terrible diseases came from natural causes, not from the curses of angry deities. As science flourished, trade exploded. The Greek agora became a bustling epicenter of commerce, exchanging olive oil, wine, and radical new ideas. These ideas culminated in 508 BC. On the rocky hills of Athens, thousands of ordinary citizens gathered to peacefully vote on state affairs. By simply dropping a pebble into an urn, they shattered the old world order. This exact moment marks the official birth of Democratia. Led by the statesman Cleisthenes, the Athenians celebrated a radical new concept, that the state truly belonged to the free people. This newfound freedom birthed classical culture. Massive stone theaters were carved into hillsides, where thousands watched the very first tragedies and comedies. Even amidst their rivalries, all Greeks united every 4 years at the Olympic Games, laying down their weapons to celebrate human physical perfection. Their fast merchant ships dominated the Mediterranean, spreading this advanced, vibrant culture from the coasts of Spain all the way to Egypt. And at the center of this unified spiritual world sat the Oracle of Delphi, where kings and philosophers alike sought prophecies from Apollo. By the 6th century BC, this fractured mountainous peninsula had become the most intellectually advanced civilization on the planet. They were entering a glorious golden age of art, architecture, and reason, but their brilliant light had attracted a colossal predator. To the east, the massive Achaemenid Persian Empire had swallowed half the known world. Now its terrifying gaze was fixed upon tiny Greece.
In 490 BC, Emperor Darius unleashed his revenge. A massive Persian fleet sailed across the Aegean Sea to completely annihilate the city of Athens. The Persian invasion force landed at the Bay of Marathon, a strategic beach located just 26 miles away from the terrified Athenian capital. Vastly outnumbered, Athens sent a runner to Sparta begging for help, but the Spartans refused, citing a sacred religious festival. Athens stood alone. Facing total destruction, the Athenian general Miltiades executed a brilliant suicidal tactic. He ordered his heavily armored hoplites to charge at a full sprint. The dense bronze-clad Greek phalanx violently smashed through the lightly armored Persian infantry. The Battle of Marathon became a stunning, impossible Greek victory. This single battle proved that free, democratic citizen soldiers could defeat the massive slave armies of an empire, but the Persian threat was far from over. Exactly 10 years later, in 480 BC, Darius's son, Emperor Xerxes, returned to finish the job, bringing the largest invasion force in human history. Ancient sources claimed millions marched. Xerxes literally built a massive engineering marvel, a bridge of wooden ships across the Hellespont to cross into Europe. Facing absolute annihilation, the bitter rivals of Athens and Sparta achieved the impossible. They formed a desperate, unified military alliance to save Greece. To buy time, the Spartan king Leonidas marched north with a tiny vanguard of just 300 elite Spartans and a few thousand local allies. Their suicidal mission was to hold the narrow coastal pass of Thermopylae, known as the Hot Gates, forcing the massive Persian army into a bottleneck. For 3 incredibly bloody days, the heavy bronze Spartan shields and ruthless discipline slaughtered thousands of Xerxes' soldiers, including his elite royal immortals. When the Persian emperor demanded the Greeks surrender their weapons, King Leonidas famously delivered the ultimate defiance, "Molon labe," come and take them. But a local Greek trader revealed a hidden mountain path to the Persians. Realizing they were outflanked, Leonidas ordered the remaining Greek allies to retreat. The 300 Spartans stayed behind, fighting to the absolute death. Their legendary heroic sacrifice bought invaluable time and morally united the terrified Greek world. The Persian army marched south and burned the evacuated city of Athens to the ground. But the brilliant Athenian general Themistocles had set a trap. He strategically lured the massive, clumsy Persian armada into the tight, restrictive waters of the Straits of Salamis, neutralizing their overwhelming numerical advantage. The heavier, incredibly fast Greek triremes relentlessly rammed and shattered the Persian vessels. The mighty Persian navy was utterly and completely destroyed in hours. Watching from a golden throne on the cliffs, a terrified Xerxes realized his army was stranded without supplies. He immediately fled back to Asia. The following year, in 497 BC, the united Greek infantry crushed the remaining Persian army at Plataea. A tiny, fractured peninsula had broken a superpower.
Following the miraculous defeat of the Persian Empire in 479 BC, Athens capitalized on the victory by forming the Delian League. It was originally a mutual defense alliance of coastal Greek cities, but Athens quickly transformed it into a ruthless Athenian empire. Athens possessed the largest navy in the Mediterranean. They began forcing their allies to pay heavy annual tributes in silver and ships. Under the brilliant, charismatic statesman Pericles, Athens funneled this massive imperial wealth directly into rebuilding their previously burned capital. In 447 BC, Pericles commissioned the construction of the Parthenon on the Acropolis. It was the absolute pinnacle of classical architecture. This era became known as the Golden Age of Athens. Playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides invented complex theatrical tragedies and comedies. The eccentric philosopher Socrates wandered the agora, inventing the Socratic method of critical questioning, laying the absolute foundation for Western philosophy. But Athenian arrogance grew out of control. When the allied island of Thasos tried to leave the League, Athens mercilessly crushed them. The Athenians tore down the island's walls, confiscated their navy, and forced them to pay massive financial reparations. Athens became a tyrant. This aggressive, unchecked Athenian imperialism deeply terrified the other great superpower of the Greek world, the heavily militarized state of Sparta. In 431 BC, the extreme political tension finally snapped. The devastating Peloponnesian War began, plunging the entire Greek world into chaos. It was a brutal, decades-long civil war between two completely opposite systems. Sparta had the invincible land army, Athens had the untouchable navy. Knowing they couldn't defeat the Spartan infantry, Pericles ordered all Athenian citizens to retreat behind the massive, impenetrable walls of their city. The strategy was to use their dominant navy to import food, while the Spartans fruitlessly burned the empty farmland outside the walls. But in 430 BC, disaster struck. A horrifying, highly contagious plague broke out inside the overcrowded, unsanitary, and besieged city of Athens. The catastrophic plague killed nearly a third of the entire Athenian population within a few years, including their visionary leader, Pericles. Desperate and politically unstable, Athens launched a massive, incredibly risky naval expedition to conquer the distant island of Sicily in 415 BC. It was a complete and utter catastrophe. The entire magnificent Athenian fleet and thousands of soldiers were completely annihilated in Syracuse. Bankrupt, starving, and entirely blockaded by a new Spartan fleet funded by Persian gold, the glorious city of Athens unconditionally surrendered in 404 BC. The brutal Peloponnesian War lasted 27 years. It completely exhausted the Greek city-states, leaving them terribly vulnerable to a new northern predator.
The Peloponnesian War had fractured the Greek world. For decades, exhausted city-states continued their endless, pointless conflicts, unaware of a rising power to the north.
In 359 BC, Philip II became the king of Macedonia, a nation the Greeks considered barbaric, but which possessed massive mineral resources and a unified warrior aristocracy. Philip was a military genius. He revolutionized the phalanx, arming his professional soldiers with the sarissa, an unprecedented 6-meter-long spear. Macedonia expanded rapidly. In 338 BC, Philip's modernized army crushed the combined force of Athens and Thebes at the Battle of Chaeronea, effectively unifying Greece under his control. Philip unified Greece with a single goal, a grand pan-Hellenic invasion to seek revenge against the eternal enemy, the Persian Empire. Before his invasion could begin, Philip was assassinated in 336 BC. His 20-year-old son, Alexander, inherited his father's massive imperial dream. He was a visionary, educated by the philosopher Aristotle himself. Alexander didn't just want to conquer, he wanted to create a unified world. In 334 BC, Alexander's unified Greek and Macedonian army crossed the Hellespont into Asia, launching one of the most brilliant military campaigns in history. His first major victory came at the Granicus River, proving the superiority of the Sarissa phalanx and Alexander's own invincible courage. At the Battle of Issus in 333 BC, Alexander's strategic brilliance trapped and annihilated the central Persian army, capturing the entire family of the Persian king Darius III. Alexander marched south, conquering the Levant and Egypt. In 331 BC, he was declared the Pharaoh of Egypt, founding the glorious new city of Alexandria. The final, decisive clash with Persia occurred at Gaugamela in 331 BC. Darius III fielded an army twice as large, but Alexander's tactics crushed the Persian center once again. Darius III fled, and Alexander entered Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, officially becoming the new master of the entire Persian world and king of kings. Alexander pursued Darius for months, only to find him assassinated by his own treacherous satraps in 330 BC. The ultimate Persian resistance had ended. His ambition was limitless. Alexander led his army further east into modern-day Afghanistan and Pakistan, launching difficult, prolonged guerrilla campaigns. In 326 BC, he fought his final major battle at the Hydaspes River in India against King Porus and a terrifying army of war elephants. His exhausted army finally mutinied, refusing to go any further into the unknown. Heartbroken, Alexander was forced to begin the brutal march home. In 323 BC, back in Babylon, Alexander the Great, the master of the known world at just 32, suddenly fell ill and died without naming an heir. He had not only conquered lands, but spread Greek language, culture, and science. This concept, known as Hellenism, created new centers of power like Alexandria and Antioch. Alexander's massive empire immediately fractured into warring successor kingdoms led by his top generals, the Diadochi, setting the stage for the arrival of a new global predator, Rome.
Alexander's sudden death in 323 BC left a massive power vacuum. His vast, unified empire immediately shattered into warring successor states ruled by his generals. These ruthless Macedonian generals, known as the Diadochi, spent the next 40 years fighting bloody, devastating civil wars to claim Alexander's fractured throne. The Mediterranean was carved into massive Hellenistic kingdoms: Ptolemaic Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in the east, and Antigonid Macedonia back in Greece. But while these Greek kings built magnificent new cities like Alexandria, their endless greedy wars left the Greek homeland completely exhausted and deeply divided. This fatal weakness was exactly what a terrifying new apex predator was waiting for in the West: the rising, methodical Roman Republic. Rome had violently conquered the Italian peninsula.
Now its highly disciplined tactical legions turned their hungry eyes toward the incredible wealth of the Greek East. The ultimate clash began in the 2nd century BC. The flexible, sword-wielding Roman legion proved absolutely devastating against the outdated, rigid Macedonian spear phalanx. In 197 BC, at the Battle of Cynocephalae, the Roman army systematically slaughtered the Macedonian forces, shattering their ancient myth of military invincibility forever. The final, tragic blow came in 146 BC. The Achaean League of Greek city-states desperately launched a doomed, suicidal rebellion against Roman dominance. The Roman general Mummius mercilessly crushed the rebellion. To send a horrifying message to the world, he completely burned the magnificent city of Corinth. Its male citizens were slaughtered, its women and children were enslaved, and its priceless art was shipped to Rome. Greek political independence was dead. Greece was officially reduced to a mere, humble province of the colossal Roman Empire. By all logical historical rules, their story should have ended there. But this is where the greatest paradox in human history occurred. The Romans violently conquered the Greek land, but they were utterly mesmerized. The Roman elites didn't destroy Greek culture, they obsessed over it. Captive Greece successfully initiated a massive total cultural takeover of its fierce conqueror. Wealthy Romans hired Greek philosophers to educate their children. The Latin alphabet itself was a direct structural adaptation of the ancient Greek script. Roman engineers meticulously copied Greek marble architecture to build their empire. Even the Roman pantheon of gods was entirely synchronized with Greek mythology. The Roman Emperor Hadrian, who ruled in the 2nd century AD, was so obsessed with Greek culture he practically rebuilt the ancient city of Athens. When the Roman Empire eventually split, the eastern half, the Byzantine Empire, completely dropped Latin and ruled for 1,000 years in the Greek language. Today, we look at ancient statues and think of a dead, exotic past. But Greece is not a dead museum culture at all. They invented our logic, our democracy, and our science. They lost their land, but they successfully programmed the eternity that we live in today.